All right, and we are live here. Hang on here. I was trying my best to get my webcam set up, and apparently it does not want to cooperate with me here. So, might not be on the camera or webcam as I anticipated. It's actually probably for the better because I do not have a real office setup with my thing here. My room set up here. I don't have an office. I don't have an office or gaming chair. I don't have a desk to lay my computer on. I have a tiny end table that I was graciously allowed to use, and then I have just a standard laptop. I don't even really have necessarily the greatest webcam here. But I've got my mic, and that's what counts. And I do have, the ability to talk about stuff here. Sorry if it seems like I'm just clicking, if I'm clicking around here. And please let me know if the audio is awkward or anything like that. I actually don't have any real problems right now with what's on screen here, I should say. Now, I do have some articles and things that I wanted to kind of showcase as a part of this, but we'll see if that even matters here. I'm not afraid. I might have to do a little bit of tinkering and editing to even get them to work because I was just kind of looking into and doing some things, and yeah, so this is a bit of a new experience for me here with this. I am rambling. Anyways, so I thought with this, what spurred this on was somebody on Facebook, or not Facebook, somebody on Twitter, and I know it's a great sign of things to come, right? Something on Twitter kind of thing. But it was actually one of those things where I was actually kind of intrigued by the idea, or not intrigued by the idea, but I was kind of like thinking, this is where this particular, or not this, where this particular thing is actually more like a groan of exasperation of being like, oh, for crying out loud, this again. And it was that apparently in a brand new, and I'm sure it's a side story, or at least that's the justification people will use for it, a side story of the Batman comics, or a side story of the Batman comics, a side piece of the Batman comics. It's hinted at of Bruce Wayne being, bisexual at a very young age. Hey, Toy, welcome. Like I said, I'm trying to maybe see if I could fiddle around with the webcam here. I'm not exactly too sure because I never really gave it much thought. But even then, I'm not necessarily too worried about it here. Actually, for some reason, Twitch Studio does not want to integrate my webcam, or does not want me to use my integrated webcam. So I actually do have a legitimate excuse for not hop on VC voice chat. Sure, I'll hang on here. I've got my stream mic here. Just a second here. Oh yeah, that's right. You just do Discord on your computer, genius. That would probably work just as well. Discord. Yeah, shut up. All right. Let's see here now. All right. And start voice chat.
Hey.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So for those of you who end up watching the VOD of this, I am here with my pal Toy TL3, who also does Twitch streaming and is just a all around cool dude.
What's up, fuckers?
So yeah, so I mean, I guess like I was trying to say, the impetus of what brought this on was just a random Twitter post about the fact that they were gonna make a version of Bruce Wayne bisexual, and I was just kind of like scratching my head and being like, why? What's the point?
Yeah.
Not even necessarily like, oh man, they had to turn Batman gay. No, that's not even the point. At this point, it's honestly more like, like what's the point? But I did kind of want to go through and just kind of discuss, with a little bit of levity to start, or at the very least before going into like the heavy political stuff or like the political implications when talking about the comic industry. First thing's obvious is that the sales numbers are just not there anymore. It's a niche market, and it always has been. And the market is kind of crumbling in on itself. And I think a lot of people would say that it's a combination of Marvel Cinematic and DC Universe fatigue, as well as the books themselves not being interesting. I don't know if you have any input on that.
Me personally, well, I think like I will look at it this I look at it this way. It's very easy for us in the heteronormative persuasion to see things like this and not necessarily get upset about it, but to question like why are they doing this? Because it's just it's just like for the longest time these have been especially like in the case of Batman and Superman and things, these have really been non-issues. But I think that that's also a part of where, like I said, I think part of it is also because like you and I are not part of the community that does not have very much representation. And because we are white cis hetero men, we have more representation than really anybody else in the foreseeable outstretch of everything going on. So I'm reminded of specifically when Star Wars The Force Awakens first came out, and there was the trailer with like the first thing people see is Finn in the stormtrooper outfit, and immediately you have the neckbeards proclaiming that is like why is the stormtrooper got to be black and all this other shit, and they knew absolutely nothing about the context. They knew absolutely nothing about why Finn was in the position that he was. All they saw was like black guy in stormtrooper outfit, and everybody lost their collective shit. Everybody was all of those people were pooping their pampers over something that they did not understand.
Oh, and I
Now,
mean, I'm
yeah,
sorry, you
no,
finish
no,
your.
go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I mean, oh, absolutely. That's not that. There's definitely no denying that that is kind of one of those issues, or I should say, things that as a society, you don't tend to think about. That's
Yeah,
very true, and I mean, it didn't bother me in the slightest. I'd never even gave it a second thought, and
yeah,
honestly, I look at the disdain with the same, a similar disdain for those, people that will, warp that type of scenario because you're making the mountain out of the molehill, as it were.
yeah. Um, but I was and it's like the big thing that's popular to say now is that comics are getting too political. And I would argue that anybody that says comics are now getting too political um have not been paying attention to the trend of comics in general over the past few decades.
Yeah,
Because
absolutely.
because it's like X-Men in and of itself is an allegory for for bigotry, and a lot of people just either they don't make the connection or it just goes over their head.
Well,
But
that's the
yeah,
problem. Is that that's the problem. And I think a lot of other more modern readers have had, though, is the fact is not the fact that the political messages are even inserted in there. It's the fact that they've lost the subtlety. It's like basically the only way for it to be subtle is for it to smack you upside the head with a crowbar with the word subtle written on the crowbar, kind of thing. And that's, I
oh
think, a
yeah,
lot of the problem. And then you've got more blatant, just like, if it's not if it's not actual pandering, it's just kind of like it makes you, kind of tilt and scratch your head and be like, I mean, great for you for trying it, but if nobody buys it, don't blame me, kind of thing. Like, one thing that
yeah,
got my goat a long time ago was when Marvel literally made two characters named Snowflake and Safe Space, and they were like these twins of like, I don't even know, because I didn't bother to pick it up because obviously I wasn't going to pick it up because it didn't interest me, but at the same time I was kind of like, you do realize how niche a market they are. To kind of like circle back to what I'm saying is that comic books as a whole are far more niche than a lot of people give it credit for. So that means I think that the Marvel Cinematic Universe has kind of bloated people's ideas of the comic reading base and how many people actually would enjoy the comics and take the time and investment. And then they realize, oh crap, comics are $5 a pop. And then if I want a trade collection, that's like $25 a pop. Oh, I could spend, my money and time on a dime store book at a bookstore if I really wanted to, or
yeah. I I would attribute the the whole snowflake and safe space thing as something that on paper might have sounded good, and to Marvel's credit, like their I think their heart was in the right place, but I think it was just like hit the nail too hard on the head there. Like I know people in the queer community that even saw that and was like, "Oh, this is fucking ridiculous," And I mean, and I even know people in the queer community that I mean, granted, not many, but some of them are kind of in the same boat as like they like the time and effort that it takes to make so and so a part of the community, they could use that same effort to create original characters that just so happen to be part of that community.
Absolutely, and that's always been
Yeah.
my take on it. I understand that the financial risk and incentive is there, but that actually kind of brings up another point as to why, and this is a really non-political point, but this is
Oh, yeah.
really why the industry has kind of begun to circle the drain. It's not just the repetitive writing slash crowbarring in of social issues. It's that the art is so blasé and it's so like obsessed with like pastel colors and like what happened? I mean, say what you will about Rob Liefeld in the 1990s, but at least you could distinguish one artist's artwork from another or a time period from another. I don't know if anybody is going to look back at the last 5, 6 years of comics and say, other than the writing, what distinguishes these books from one another? Because the art is pretty much the same for the most part. You've got a couple standout artists, and then everything else is just either way too dark or way too pastel.
Yeah. And I I would be inclined to agree with that. Um, and I say this as somebody that, I am not like a big comic book guy.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not necessarily um, somebody that like I am definitely not uh, in the world of comic books. I am not the like key demographic,
Mm-hmm.
and and that's fine. I don't need to be in the key demographic, but I can also see the trend of what's going on. And I think where the part that you and I don't necessarily agree, so to speak, is that I don't see it as necessarily a bad thing that like they're attempting to be inclusive. I think part of it is that we try. It can almost be seen as trying too hard to be inclusive. And I think the big thing about like the latest thing with like Superman,
Mm-hmm.
like oh, Superman is bisexual or whatever, and people don't seem to understand that that's not like the same Superman. That I think if I remember
It's a
correctly,
son. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So it's not like your Superman is still fucking like straight as an arrow, So and I don't think I don't think people understand fully that you know new generation, new way of doing things.
Yeah,
And
I would agree with that. And again, it's not even it's one of those things where it's like with with the inclusion and diversity, it's not even so much that they're doing it. It's just that it is one of those cases where it feels very forced. And the other problem is that while it is worth noting that obviously it is, John Kent, the problem
mhm,
is that a lot of non-comics fans aren't necessarily going to read into that. They are going and again, I'm not saying that you have to be a comics fan to enjoy comics. I know one of the big
yeah,
contentious things from the comics gate thing was that comics should be for everyone. And I agree, most certainly. But obviously, not every book is going to be for everyone. And you
oh
also
yeah,
would have to accept the financial ramifications and the criticism that comes with those books. And that kind of gets into one of my other big problems with the modern industry, and it's a combination of political powder kegging and just the social media atmosphere in general. But
Hmm.
writers just seem to attack the fans for, thinking, like when they lobby any little criticism at their books now, it's all, oh, my day is complete because I triggered a right winger. One thing that came to mind was, and again, to use Batman, probably because he's one of my favorites, but there
Yeah.
was a spin-off series called Batman Fortress. And in the opening issue,
Hmm.
Batman literally ignores a series of, a street riot because he's got to go stop, I think it was the Joker or something like that. When the core of being a superhero, especially Batman, is that he protects everyone. Like
Yeah.
that's the basics. I mean, even a superhero that knows they can't save everyone, they'll make the token effort to try even when it's out of hand. And Batman with his gadgets, you mean to tell me he can't disperse a riot in 10 minutes? He's just going to let them, like go crazy and loot. And it was like some sort of statement of, oh, Batman, it wasn't necessarily saying Batman supports Antifa, but it's like, ignoring that, oh, somebody, it's just property, man. That's not, it's not my problem. I got to save the city because, from, by catching the big fish, and forget the little guy.
Yeah. Um, but yeah, it's like there's always going to be some people that no matter what you do, they're going to find issue with it. It doesn't matter, like, because you legit cannot placate to everybody, and if you try to do that, then you're you're gonna run you're just gonna run yourself in circles, um, trying to please everybody. So you have to kind of make a choice. It seems anyway that okay, do you want to placate to your hardcore fan base, or do you want to try to reach out and get new readers,
Well,
especially with the changing political climate that's going on now?
right. Well, I
And
mean, there are two things to note about that. Number one, I was reading the other day, um, a quote that apparently Michael Jackson said, both Democrats and Republicans buy shoes. So, I guess it's just I mean, yeah, it's a cynical way to look at it, but it is basic economics kind of thing.
yeah,
And I know, again, with when it comes to political issues, or just even inserting stuff like this, yeah, you're not going to please everybody. I'm not a fool. I'm more or less just trying to get into the headspace of the writer who thinks that, you know, not only espousing their political views on social media, which, hey, that's your
hmm,
platform. You're free to do what you want, but then to have that cross over into the characters. And I know I mean, one of my favorite people in the comic book industry, Steve Ditko, one of his most
hmm,
famous characters, basically espoused his view of objectivism. And I've actually found myself very fascinated by Steve Ditko and
yeah,
objectivism because of it. But at the same time, you have to know kind of where you call the line. And is this teaching you about objectivism, which I feel is kind of more or less with what Steve Ditko tried to do with the character as the tool, like, you know,
hmm,
with objectivism? Or is it like Eric Larson, Savage Dragon, basically, browbeating you with the freaking characters to go vote Democrat or get vaxxed or what have you? And
yeah,
hey, that's free. If Image wants to print his book, and he's one of the top guys there, that's fine. I'm just saying,
hmm.
you don't be surprised then when people say, "Wow, this is really on the nose," and I almost find it offensive that you expect me to pay $5 for this.
I would agree to a point, but there again, I would say that there are some people that that's the only way that you're going to reach them is sometimes being sometimes being subversive about it or being subtle about it is not going to do much. Sometimes there are some people that will not understand unless you literally hit them over the head with what you're trying to what you're trying to say. It's either that they just don't get it, or they're willfully like tuning it out. And especially for the people that willfully tune it out, the second it becomes more apparent, like all of a sudden, then it's an agenda. Then they've gone woke, or whatever buzzword you want to put on it right now. I can definitely see. I can understand the idea of, like, if you haven't been exposed to that way of thinking, and then one of your favorite types of media suddenly swings in that direction, it can be a bit of a shock to your system, because it's like it's a case of like trying to separate the art from the artist. There are several people, like actors, musicians, whatever, that I know for a fact are shit human beings, and because of that, I cannot enjoy what they put out. I cannot separate the art from the artist. Some people can, and more power to them. I wish I had that ability to disassociate with that. I cannot do that. And I've seen so many people that are like, oh, so and so was suddenly in put out something that is in opposition to a minor inconvenience of mine. Therefore, they've gone woke and boycott. By the way, fucking boycotts. I hate to say it, but they do nothing. Boycotts do absolutely fuck all. It's like you can get a small group of people together and say, oh, we're not going to buy such and such. Like, okay, what about the other millions of people that are? I understand the idea behind it, but unless I hate to say it, but unless you're in the majority about something like that, nothing's going to get accomplished.
Well, I do think I think it's, first of all, it's a matter of principle. Obviously, I mean, in an era where we're always, lecturing ourselves about, double standards and hypocrisy. If you go through with it and you actually stick to your guns on it, I mean, to use a famous example, Linkara said he wouldn't buy another Spider-Man issue until Mephisto's Deal with the Devil, one of the most stupid decisions in comic book history, was undone, and I don't think he's bought a Peter Parker or a Spider-Man issue since. So
yeah, what was that? One
more day,
or,
yes.
Yeah, one more day. Yeah, because it's like that one I never understood. It's like I want your marriage. It's like, the fuck.
Yeah, that's a whole nother issue.
Yeah, Mephisto, the literal devil of the Spider-Man universe. Like, that's anyway. Like, that's a whole nother tangent.
Of stupid decisions that short-sighted comic book writers and editors have made over time.
That's a whole nother rant for a whole nother time.
Pretty much.
But I would say the same type of thing with video games. Like, especially when the subject matter is like when quote unquote gamer boys are forced to, well, not I wouldn't say forced, but it's like if your main protagonist is a woman, all of a sudden you get guys coming out of their mother's basements going on about, like, well, I'm not going to play this game if I got to play a chick.
My
that
rebuttal to that would be, if you, I mean, as great as the new Crystal Dynamics Tomb Raiders were, ask
mhm.
yourself the honest question: Did anything was there anything literally different from Laura Croft and Nathan Drake other than their sex? I mean,
I
yeah,
would,
personality wise they were different, but
yeah. My only complaint about, especially with the first uh game in the Tomb Raider trilogy, is that the developers seemed to get an almost sexual pleasure in seeing how much they could do damage to Laura Croft. Like they put her through these, what I would say are almost unsurvivable um instances, and she would literally just seem to shrug it off like nothing happened. And they would constantly, like I know in the first game they toyed with the idea of one of the baddies
yeah.
trying to,
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to figure out a good way to put this on Twitch,
Forced.
to have his way with
Mm-hmm.
her. Um and I understand that that is a likely scenario. She is a woman, she is going to be perceived as weak and helpless and everything, and the fact that she is able to get out of it, bravo for her. That's fantastic. But there are some that would argue, like, did that need to be in there? Like, was that necessary? And like, if I remember correctly, I think the game was either written or directed by a woman. I think I'm gonna look
Don't
that up
quote me on, yeah, yeah.
I'm gonna look that up real quick.
Yep.
Um, you just
I'll just say while you're
uh
doing that the
yeah.
the idea then becomes, well, if you want equality, like the kind of thing, like, I mean, Nathan Drake, again, to use the example, since they were
Mhm.
basically carbon copies of each other and kind of the adventure aspect and everything, the whole point of Nathan Drake was that he got basically the shit beat out of him for being a smarmy douchebag. And obviously, you don't have to make Laura Croft the exact copy of that in the personality department, but
Yeah.
true equality, unfortunately, would mean that, as unrealistic as it would be, granted, for
Mhm.
both of them to survive, if you're going to do it to one, you got to do it to both. And,
Oh yeah.
I mean, that's my other big thing too, is when people bark about equality and what you really mean is you want special treatment in certain instances because you feel that you've been let down in other instances of your life because of your insert sex, religion, gender,
Yeah.
political beliefs, whatever. And I can get that, but don't bark to me that that's equality then.
Yeah. Okay, so Tomb Raider 2013 had three writers, and
Oofa.
two of them were women. So, okay, that's interesting. I did not know that. I knew that, I knew there were women involved in it
Mm-hmm.
at some big part of it. Um as far as the whole gender equality thing, that's a that's a delicate uh thing to tread on, I think, to a degree,
Mm-hmm.
because you have these people that are like, is that like, okay, well, if women want equality, then why the fuck aren't we allowed to hit them? And it's like, if that's your first go-to when discussing women's equal rights, there's something wrong with you.
Oh yeah, no, no,
um
no. That's
yeah,
not
yeah.
that's not the right path.
No, no, I mean, and I get, to a degree, like it's like inclusion is always good. Diversity is good. Like, I would say the last thing the comic book or really video game world really needs more of is white male main characters. That's just my opinion. because we have them in abundance. There are a plethora of
Mm-hmm.
of that archetype a of a protagonist. Um, like Black Panther, for example, was an amazing step forward as far as inclusivity and diversity. Um, the actor that played Black Panther, Chadwick Boseman, was actually from my hometown.
Nice.
Little trivia there. And nice guy, just could not have. You will never find a nicer person. He is just a delight. Um, and it's like when Black Panther came out, like he came back home and literally paid for he rented out an entire section of the movie theater of our local theater and brought like 400 kids from a local orphanage to come in so they could all like privately watch Black Panther, because sadly a majority of the kids in this orphanage were children of color, and that's a whole nother issue. But it was a way for him to kind of give back. And even then like you had people crying out in arms about thing like Black Panther being too woke, because and I literally heard this said, it's like there's only two white people in the entire movie. It's just like, and it's like all the tribes, all the villagers of this movie are people of color. They are all Black people.
Mm-hmm.
Would you really expect to just see a random white person in Wakanda that wasn't there, that wasn't brought there because of plot?
Mm-hmm.
It's just like the only reason that Andy Serkis was there is because he was the bad guy. He was doing bad guy shit. And so I pretty much come to the conclusion over the years that it really doesn't matter at the end of the day what you try to do. People are always going to find fault in what goes on, whether it be like it's like you like is some of this what I would consider pandering from a male hetero cis perspective? Yes. But again, this is another example of we are not part of that community, so we really can't. I don't think it's necessarily fair or even possible for us to really grasp how important stuff like this is for those people, because I cannot relate to somebody's experience as a Black gay woman, for example, because I am none of those things. So for me to be here, for me to sit here and say, "Oh, I understand," that is to me that well, no, it's not just to me. That is very disingenuous. Um, I agree with the thought behind it, and more of you want to be understanding of the situation or what's going on. But if you're not part of that community, then it's impossible for us to really have a full grasp of what these people go through and why it's so important for them to have this representation. And I think that if it disrupts the status quo, of what's going on. I'm not necessarily opposed to that because okay, here's my big issue. You can make a character gay, black, whatever.
Well, they've already done that. There's a list,
Yeah,
literal list
yeah,
of and not even of men. This is mostly of women. The list that I'm referring or that I'm
yeah.
referring to here of women that were white that were made black. And does it serve any real purpose? No, it's just
Well,
kind of there.
I would say like back in the day, there was a very controversial Superman comic.
Mm-hmm.
And I am aware of this one just because of how I guess scandalous it was
Infamous, yeah.
at the time. Lois was she got into this certain type of contraption. I'm not entirely sure about the specifics, but Lois was literally turned into a black woman.
Yeah, I
And
remember
this was
seeing the
like
cover for that. Yeah.
yeah, and this was like way back in the day, like I think in the 60s or 70s. I'm not
Mm-hmm.
entirely certain. And throughout the entire thing, from what I remember, her first concern was, would Superman still love me even though I'm a black woman? And I think that that's very telling of like if I think that's very telling if a like of like again it's a person of color trying to seek the approval of a white man. And like it was, even at the time, it was perceived as very in poor taste. It was one of those things that on again it was on paper, it sounded like a good idea, but the execution was just horrible. And I know they're if I remember correctly, they're talking about, or it already is, Iron Man now is a black woman,
Yeah,
or
that's
they're going
Ironheart. That's been around
Iron, yeah,
for about 3 or
okay.
4 years now.
Hmm.
And that kind of brings
And
to mind,
yeah, go ahead.
not to cut you off, but that
No,
also
you're
kind
fine.
of brings to mind not this and again, this is where the carbon copy stuff kind of gets annoying. It's not so much that oh, we're giving them a brand new name and but basically the same powers. The
Hmm.
fact of the matter is almost like I don't even know if necessarily they're asking us to forget or so much to ignore, especially if we are long term comic fans, like with Miss Marvel in the Marvels Miss Marvel. Yeah, I know they got like
Hmm.
50 of them, but I
Yeah.
mean, they went from, Carol Danvers, the Captain Marvel that we you saw in the movie
Hmm.
to being um this random, Muslim kid Kamala Khan who's got Mr. Fantastic's powers. Why? Because we couldn't think of anything better. And that just kind of makes me
I haven't.
she's in the Avengers game for by Square Enix too.
Yeah.
So I mean, I'm not saying again, it's one of those things where it's like I'm trying not to be nitpicky and annoying because
Yeah.
again, it's not necessary. It shouldn't always have to appeal to me to be right, but I do miss when comic books they felt like they tried and they were outlandish as well as, serious with their political issues. And it kind of ties back into like the coloring and the writers picking fights with fans online. It feels like they
Yeah.
missed the comic book industry has passed the people that have worked in it by almost.
Uh,
That's why
I
manga's killing them now.
yeah. I mean, to that point, I would say, um, like there have been different versions of a lot of superheroes. There have been different versions of like Batman,
Oh
for
yeah,
example.
absolutely.
There was a time when I don't remember exactly what happened, but he either retired or went away for a while. and so he kind of passed the torch on to somebody else, somebody else's,
Yep.
over the past few years. I don't think that diminishes the legacy of Batman. I think it's more of from a different perspective. It was like when Miles Morales became Spider-Man. Fox News had a whole hissy fit about a black Mexican boy being the new Spider-Man. And so it was a slow news day for one.
Right.
And like it's like, because I get that these are fictional characters, and presumably they could be they could live forever, like on the written word and all that. But I also think that at some point, some of these things need to have a fresh coat of paint, so to speak, or a new perspective. And again, I think it also goes into like whatever political climate is going on at the time. I think that Miss Marvel being a Muslim girl, I have no connection to Miss Marvel. So I guess that's why I can be a little bit more
open.
Yeah.
I don't read the books a lot anymore either.
Not necessarily open, but that's why I can be a little bit more indifferent to it. Like I personally don't see I don't see a problem with Miss Marvel being a Muslim teenage girl, because again, a different perspective on things doesn't hurt. It doesn't take away from the first person to play that, to the first person to don that outfit or fight for the same cause. Like how many Green Lanterns have there been?
You're talking about one of my favorite superheroes. So
Yeah,
I mean, and amongst the human race alone, at least 6, I think.
Yeah, and I have yet to hear. I think even when Jon Stewart became,
oh, they love him, and I love him too.
Yeah. I never heard anything about when Jon Stewart became Green Lantern. I do not think that I heard anybody bitching and moaning about it, because like I also think a part of it is the fact that back in the day people were more open to change about things like that, and I think nowadays I think there is a sense of entitlement that some people, I would say a vocal minority of people, that they want things to stay the same. They want things to stay just so. And when that doesn't fit their narrative, all of a sudden it's wrong, or it's woke, or they're being politically correct, or they're caving into a quote unquote liberal agenda. And I just think that those people haven't been paying attention to the evolution of things like comic books, graphic novels, even manga. I don't think that they had been paying attention to the evolution of it for the past 20, 30, even 40 years. Because there have been some comic books that have been based, like I use X-Men as a good example, that were based around the entire idea that bigotry is wrong. They put it in a more fantasy type of setting, like this person can fly and do such and such. They're still, at the end of the day, they're still a fucking human. It doesn't matter if they have mutated genes or whatever. At the end of the day, they still cry, they still bleed. Conceivably, they can also die. Superman has died I don't know how many times. And I don't, let's say, and that's a whole nother thing about them dying and coming back. I think that's a whole bunch of shit, but
Well,
that's a whole nother
that's
thing.
kind of brings back the other reason why, to kind of, sorry to cut you off, but
Oh no.
it does bring to mind one of the big reasons why I've given up on reading a lot of modern comics is because you mentioned the whole John Stewart thing. A lot of that
Mhm.
happens to be because of slow burns and builds. And now one of the biggest problems of the industry is, I mean, we can argue the politics is,
Mhm.
to some people a big problem, but even beyond the politics, the biggest issue right now with the comic book industry, it isn't the art, it isn't the writers, it isn't even the politics. It's the fact that they keep rebooting everything.
Oh, new
Everything
fit.
is on like a 3 or to 5 year shelf life, and they never let anything breathe organically.
Yeah, I think that whole thing started with when with the New 52.
Yes, and the new
They were
52
like
was
they were
fine in
yeah
short doses, but then it blew up, and then it blew up in their
yeah,
faces again.
and I get the idea behind the New 52.
Hmm.
I think I thought it was
Harley
a
Quinn got a
good
solo
idea.
series, and it was damn good.
Yeah, I think it was a great idea for, like, say if I wanted to get into reading comic books
Hmm.
now, that would, like, the New 52 would probably be my go-to because it's a giant it's a giant reboot of like the entire the entire universe.
Hmm.
And because like there are storylines now, I will say this about some storylines about comic books back in the day. There are some storylines that were carried over like a 20-30 year period.
Hmm.
And those were fantastic.
Hmm.
The only problem with that is if you're somebody like me and have never like touched a comic book in their life, and
No
they're like,
narrative
"Oh, I want to
captions.
get yeah," and "Oh, I want to get started." Let's say hypothetically, if I wanted to get started reading Deadpool,
Hmm.
like I would just like it would be very difficult for me to just grab a random comic or graphic novel and just start reading, and then there's this person that comes in and Deadpool knows who they are,
Hmm.
but like who is this guy? Like, oh, this has been his nemesis since 1989. So, and because I have, and then my OCD brain would have to find every comic book or any type of anything with Deadpool from 1989 and start reading from there. And then when I do that, there's usually going to be another character that I
Hmm.
have no idea, and the cycle continues
Hmm.
like that. So the idea of the New 52, like a giant reboot for new readers, I think was a brilliant idea. I think it blew up in their face
To the point where they had to
because
do DC Rebirth and basically do it again. They did
yeah,
that like
because
5 years later.
they wanted to do too much too quickly. And that's the same thing that I would attribute that with the same thing as the DC cinematic universe.
Hmm.
They wanted to do. Now I am not like a Marvel fanboy. Like I will
Hmm.
gladly point out flaws in
Hmm.
Marvel movies. If gunned in my head, I had to do it. Like
Hmm.
I like to shut my brain off and enjoy movies. I don't
Of
like to
course, yeah,
really
I get
yeah,
that.
I don't like to critique something because like this is entertainment. Like
Hmm.
does it always make sense? No,
No.
but just shut your brain off and enjoy it. But I think the biggest problem with the DC cinematic universe is that they tried to be too much like Marvel too quickly.
Hmm.
Um they put out I think like two or three like they put out like Wonder Woman and Batman versus Superman, which I loved. By the way, I'm in the big minority for liking Batman versus Superman. And then they wanted to do Justice League, which is basically their version of the Avengers. Marvel crafted their whole thing over a course of years, like 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 years and years before even attempting to do the Avengers. And you have Justice League,
Flash, you
which
saw him
is
once in Suicide Squad. You had
yeah
you
yeah
Cyborg, who you never saw, and
yeah, and then you had
Aquaman, who didn't get his own movie yet.
Yeah, and then like the Flash, which
No, we're not
he
gonna touch
made,
that. No.
no, I'm just saying, like, not the actor, but the character of the Flash appeared for like 2 seconds in, I think, Batman versus Superman.
And the
Said like
Suicide
two,
Squad, yeah.
said like 2 words and then went away. That is not okay for me. Not only as a moviegoer, but as a fan of this genre of film. That is not enough to get me invested in that. Like, oh, there's a random what's his fuck. Like, oh, I'm not invested in that just because they make an appearance. I am a fan of the X-Men movies, but I will not be watching every X-Men movie that they put out just because they put it out. Especially the latest X-Men movies are absolute horseshit in so many ways. But also, okay, I got a great example. The new Resident Evil show on Netflix.
Yeah,
People,
I'm one of the few people who would defend the new Resident Evil movie, Raccoon City, because it just had enough fan service.
Yeah, I haven't seen those yet, but I want to. But
I know, the Netflix show, yeah.
Yeah, they made Wesker black.
That wasn't an issue for me. It just was it was the cringy crap that they were throwing in on top of it.
Yeah, and it's like, well, see, excuse me. Everybody, well, not everybody, but again, you have that vocal minority that was so upset because a fictional character that does not exist is another race.
I'm going to be honest, not to cut you off, but the feedback I saw from a lot of Resident Evil fan groups was not even they did not even care about the Wesker being black. They were more
it's just shitty writing.
They were mortified by the trailers and like being like, oh god, how could they fuck this up even more? And a lot of fan groups don't like the new Welcome to Raccoon City movie because they think it's a betrayal of the characters. But I say but I enjoyed the different interpretation of it, and especially the loving recreations of the set pieces from
I will say this as I'm sorry. I will say as cringy as some things may be, these things were signed off with the approval of the original creators. So for people to say it's a betrayal of their legacy, if they signed off on it, if they don't see it as a betrayal, at more of like a different interpretation of the character, then the people that are crying foul have they have no hill to die on, because it's like Ghost in the Shell, the live action Ghost in the Shell movie with Scarlett Johansson.
Yep.
Everybody, well, again, I keep saying everybody, but there was so many people that were upset. They accused the film of whitewashing because Scarlett Johansson was playing a character that
Japanese.
Was originally of a Japanese property. But even the creator of Ghost in the Shell defended her, saying, like, you do know she's not real, right? Like, she's a fictional, like, she is not Japanese, she is not American, she's a fucking robot or android or whatever. So that kind of squashed people's that took the wind out of their sails real quick. And then they went on to decipher, like, oh, okay, then it's just a shitty movie because of writing or whatever. So there's people are always going to find an issue with something they already don't like.
Oh yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
And that's true of any media, like comic books, video games, movies, TV shows, books. If they've already made up their mind that they're not going to like it, then nothing you or I will say can say will change their mind. It's like they'll, like, if you ever hear the phrase, nobody can convince me of such and such, then there's no point in talking to them about it, because they've already made up their mind, and anything you have to say is going to change. It's going to change that.
Absolutely.
And,
that's why you got to make the best most convincing product, to just make sure that you win over the people that are gonna support you. And again, that's kind of where my issues with where the industry is going kind of really stems from. It's like, I mean, you can say that you got to try new things. You can say that we obviously need diversity, and diversity is great. I would personally love to see a superhero with autism, as somebody to kind of represent me, but I don't need it in my life to feel vindicated at the same time. And I'm not saying that it's about vindication either with representation or diversity or anything like that. Just that, you take, when we take these types of risks and these ventures, you got to realize what the audience is and what the audience isn't. And I think the movies and the television shows have set a bit of an unfair expectation for a lot of these, for the comic book side of things, that, in many ways, because of the money that they raked in, they've allowed themselves to hedge their bets a little bit more. And yeah, it's great that they're taking more risks, but they're financially bloodletting to the point where, if I think if the studios actually looked at the comic divisions for DC and Marvel, they would be like, what the heck are you guys doing? We'll just buy out the properties and, axe all of you.
Yeah, I would.
Maybe a little too nihilistic of me, but it kind of feels like that's the way things have been kind of trending, and it's not working. It's not going to be rosy on the comic book end either forever, because movies have a shelf life and a time span, and the comic book craze is dying out soon. Just ask the westerns and detective noir movies and the slasher movies of the 80s and 90s. All of a shelf life.
I would say definitely that like, it's the same thing with the vampire and the zombie craze. It gets oversaturated over time.
I think we've reached that point a couple years ago.
Yeah, and sadly, I think superhero movies are going that same. Or if it hasn't, it's definitely going in that direction, because they just announced, like, Phase 5 and Phase 6 for the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and again, in Phase 6, there's another Avengers movie.
You can't drum up interest for some of the stuff that you've got right now. Like, you couldn't, like, drum up interest for, like, Shang-Chi or Eternals, even though people maybe didn't, like, the critics maybe didn't shit on them as much as people expected. you couldn't
Hmm.
drum up enough interest outside of like China for like Shang-Chi and like again the Chinese market again saving a lot of the bacon there.
Yeah. I know that there. Speaking of superheroes with autism,
Mhm.
there's a big. I would be inclined to believe this based on just how I've seen their interactions in the cinematic form. There's a big theory that that Drax and Mantis are on the spectrum in some fashion or another. And with Drax, I believe it. I've seen just the way that he carries himself. Like, he's very he's very literal. Very he's like brutally honest. He has displayed like sensitivities, which I know that
Mhm.
like I've worked with people that are on the spectrum, and I know that those are three big indicators of people that are on the spectrum. So if you know they came out and like just confirmed it, I would not be shocked.
Mhm.
But again, you don't make that the central part of his character. It's the same thing with, if a person is gay or if they're autistic or if they're black or
Mhm.
whatever. It's like, okay, that's great. Like, it's great that that is being shown, but don't make that the central core of who they are, because I've seen that so many times
Mhm.
when, especially in the gay community, when a character is portrayed as gay, all of a sudden, you know at least in some instances, they suddenly become like gigantic horn dogs and all of a sudden want to fuck everything. um it doesn't work that way. Just because somebody is gay doesn't mean they want to fuck you. People, but again, you have predominantly straight people writing for gay characters. That's the overlap you're going to get. It's the
Mhm.
same reason why most of the time, um, female characters that are written by men are all the same. They fit into the same stereotypes. Um, Classic example: Meg from Family Guy. Um, they they have flat out said that they do not know how to write for female characters, so they make Meg the butt of all of their gags and jokes.
Mhm.
And like, I love Family Guy, but that
Mhm.
shit is lazy.
Yep.
It's like, here's a thought: hire a female writer, but don't hire her just because she's female. Like, don't hire her because she's a woman. Hire her because she's a good writer. To
Mhm.
hire her because of her qualifications. The fact that she is a uterus carrier should be a secondary thing. Like, is she talented? Does she have a good grasp on how this character should go? That is the big thing. And it's like, when it comes to certain characters, certain actors portraying certain characters, my first inkling on that is like, okay, if they have the talent, if they have the draw, then yes. But there's also the side of me that's like, okay, is this person appropriate to play this character for this reason or for that reason?
Mhm.
Um, like, I know a lot of people like say whatever you want about him, but Jared Leto played a trans person in a film, and he got a massive amount of shit for it because people saw that as, oh, he's taking away a part that could have gone to an actual trans person to play that role. And again, valid argument, very valid point. However, there's also the other side of that coin that is also, yes, that is valid, but he is also a huge draw. Still, for some reason, Jared Leto, or at the time before he got all fucking creepy and shit, he was a big draw at the time, and he saw it as a challenge to play something that, could not be more opposite of who he is. So there's an argument for both sides of it. But again, that is not something for me, or I would say even either of us, to make a call on. If the people of that community, a majority, signed off on it, saying that, okay, he's not a trans person, but he understands, or understands as much as he can about our struggle and what we go through, then, so be it. And there have been actors that have gone out of their way when they know that they're going to be doing something that is above their pay grade or out of their realm of understanding. Like they research and, try to figure out, like, why these people are in this situation and why they feel oppressed in a way. Now, they will never fully understand because they're not in that community. But again, it's all about education. You educate yourself on something you don't fully grasp. And hopefully you do that and it comes out as an accurate and respectful portrayal. And then you have Sia.
Yeah, I am aware of who you're referring to. Yep, and all of her stuff.
Yeah. Sia, her film was handled poorly. I think that, like, for example, I think that would have been the perfect opportunity to have somebody with autism on the spectrum to be a part of that, to play the main character, because the main character has autism. And I know that there are like varying degrees of autism. I don't mean that like, I don't mean that as like a blanket statement or anything or any or
you're not hurting my feelings. Don't worry.
Okay, well, still, I just don't. But instead, they cast somebody, and granted, this is somebody that Sia has worked with several times. Zoe something, I'm not entirely sure.
Maddie's
yeah. And I'm like, okay, I had not, okay, full disclosure, I have not seen the movie, and I'm sure that she did her best under the circumstances with what she was given. That is a situation where I felt it was unnecessary to have somebody playing the part of, because just because you have autism, it doesn't mean you can't do things that other people can do. There's just, I mean, there's just, they have different ways of going about it, and I'm telling you this like you don't know this shit.
Hey,
But
somebody who views this later or whatever, hey, there you go.
yeah, but I mean, autism, and I've known this from because I've worked with people that have autism. You have some that are like all the way down to like non-verbal
Mm-hmm.
to people that are extremely high functioning, but they have what I would call little quirks.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't make their existence any less valid. It just means that they might have a more challenging time going through life, but that doesn't mean that they can't do everything that I can do. And that's a big misconception about the autism community that I absolutely abhor,
Here, here.
because because it's like are there extreme versions of autism? Absolutely, yes, but autism is not a blanket statement over everybody with that condition. And a lot of or some people think that it is. Like I've met, I cannot tell you how many people I knew that equated autism with mental retardation.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like could not be any more different at all. And it's just trying to explain that to them, like like 3 sentences into it, and I was already just exhausted trying to explain this to them, because it's like, you ever talk to somebody and you realize that you might as well be talking to a brick wall,
Mm-hmm.
because they're just not getting it. That was how I felt, um trying to explain the vast difference between mental retardation and autism. And
Mm-hmm.
I understand, like to the uneducated person, like they can seem similar, but again, it's all about education. You just you have to educate yourself about something if you're going to evolve, and I would equate that with the changes going on in the comic book industry. It's like, you may not like necessarily what they're doing, but again, it's an example of, you have to just evolve with the times, and you know try to get on board with what's going on. And it's not by any stretch of the imagination an easy thing to do, especially if you've always, like, if you're proverbially like set in your ways about like how you have always seen things go on. It's very hard to get out of that mindset, but it's something that, if you want to continue in any fandom, you know, evolving your way of thinking is essential to that.
Yeah, I mean, evolving the way of thinking, I think, is one thing. And that's definitely not something that I'm necessarily allergic to.
Hmm.
I think my and a lot of other people's question has kind of come is, if this is all like part of a growing pain process where the books are, taking a more sophisticated or more diverse direction, when then do we get at least a fraction of the fun and just the wacky zaniness that we enjoyed, in comic books or
Mhm.
in video games. When do we have a story that's about, as many, some cartoon mascots as much as it is about, like these badass men and women, facing
Yeah.
off against drug cartels? Like, when do we get both of them back? Like at the same time, and that's like, so that's kind of, I think, the thing. And I don't know if
Yeah.
people are going to have the patience to hang on for it. And I know that I've basically said that, none of what's going on right now really interests me. The combination of the constant reboots to basically,
Mhm.
make anything that I've invested my time in, kind of worthless to the point where, or just the fact that it's become oversaturated. I mean, some characters have like 5 or 6 books. That's just overkill. I
Yeah.
mean, some product lines like Star Wars for Marvel, for example, have like 7 or 8 because they're split across different characters and
Oh yeah,
stuff.
ever since Disney bought Star Wars, like that has, I mean, I love Star Wars,
Hmm.
but when Disney bought Star Wars, like the oversaturation began almost immediately.
Yeah, and that's
Um
that's part of the
yeah.
reason why this even brought like to my attention, like, wow, the
Mhm.
comic industry is really trending in a bad direction. You can almost point to Star Wars trying to make mint on the Star Wars comic line to the point where they almost made their self-contained comic crash. The numbers are kind of there.
Yeah. Um and to that I would say like as far as Disney and Star Wars, I'm not surprised. I mean, they paid a pretty penny for that, and they're going to want to get their money's worth out of it. The only issue is that it's the same thing, and it's the same thing with Marvel. There are at least like over half a dozen Star Wars and Marvel properties I haven't sat down and watched yet because it's a bit overwhelming at this point. It's like it's too much. And I get the idea behind it, but there is such a thing as too much of a good thing. And it's like with Star Wars when the the Star Wars um sequel trilogy, like after 4, 5, and 6,
Hmm.
they came out they came out like versions of COD, like one after the other, like year after year after year.
Yeah.
And that I think that, at least for me, it kind of soured my love for it for a while,
Hmm.
because it was always like, okay, they could have, because 4, 5, and 6 are phenomenal
Hmm.
because they took their they took their time with it and fleshed out everything as much as they could. um 7, I'm sorry, it's just a female version of episode 4.
Hmm. Very
Um, that
bland, but
doesn't
passable.
that doesn't that doesn't mean I don't like it, but that's what it is. Um, and it's like things are getting to the point now where it's like, at least, like I said, at least for me, I cannot I can't sit down and enjoy something from Marvel or Star Wars as much as I used to, because one, they're so integrated now with other IPs from that same franchise, that the order of what, like, there's now like an order with which you have to watch these things now.
Mm-hmm.
And that confuses, like there's like 23 Marvel movies.
Yeah, I've
As
got the entire Blu-ray box set up
Yeah,
until Captain Marvel.
yeah, there's like over 20 um Marvel movies.
Mm-hmm.
And I sat down and have watched every single one of them. I think the only one I haven't seen, no, I have seen I did see Ant-Man and the Wasp finally. But yeah, I
Mm-hmm.
sat down. The only ones that I haven't seen are this Tom Holland's Spider-Man films, because they're not on Disney Plus, they're on Paramount Plus, and
Right.
I'll be damned. Yeah, and I am not going to get into another streaming service just to watch Spider-Man. Not doing it.
I refuse to do any streaming services and just pray and cross my fingers that some of the stuff that I want to see comes out on DVD.
Yeah. Um but uh you know so I sat down and watched those, and you see the story, you see the continuity build up. And now you can't watch like She-Hulk without knowing about, like, oh, they mentioned Tony Stark
Mm-hmm.
in this part. And like, hypothetically, if you've never watched any of the Marvel movies, don't know who Tony Stark is, that means nothing to you.
Right.
So, but but I think that as far as you were talking about, when do we get the fun stuff back in the comics, I think what we have to understand is that, at least back in the day, the things that we saw as fun and joking nowadays would be considered extremely problematic. So there's that delicate balance. You have to go
Yeah.
between being edgy and teetering over into the offensive. Being offended is not in and of itself a bad thing,
Mm-hmm.
but it's to the degree
Yeah.
that it's taken.
Right.
Because it's like Killing Joke. I think is a good example. Because I know people talked about being offended with the mental torture
Mm-hmm.
that Joker put Jim Gordon through,
Mm-hmm.
with like seeing his daughter
Yep.
nude
Mm-hmm.
after so many horrible things have been done to her.
Mm-hmm.
And that was just like the tip of the iceberg for that. People got offended about that, but at the same time, something like that was necessary to show you what a terrible person that this Joker character is. Like, that is a great example of, like, you could know you. I think you could go into Killing Joke knowing nothing about Batman or the Joker, or even
Mm-hmm.
like passing, like, even if you have passing knowledge, you know that Joker and Batman are, they're enemies.
Mm-hmm.
If you go into it with just that amount of knowledge, then that's what that he shoots Barbara Gordon, paralyzes her.
Mm-hmm.
She later on becomes Oracle.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so that could be considered offensive, just because of what the Joker puts Barbara Gordon through. But I would see that as a necessary evil for the evolution of not only the Joker, but for Barbara Gordon, for Jim Gordon, and for Batman.
Mm-hmm.
So the the line between being edgy to progress a story proper and being offensive for the sake of being offensive, it's a thin line.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a fucking tightrope that you have to be very delicate with, because what I consider not offensive, you might, and vice versa. What somebody doesn't consider to be like over the line or too offensive, I might not bat an eye at. So it's a very much an individual thing. Like,
Mm-hmm.
for example, I can I'm a big proponent that when it comes to like stand-up comedy, like everything's up for grabs. I always have said that, I always will. But also there's a delicate balance
Mm-hmm.
in how that needs to be done. Like my sister was a victim of, without going into too much detail.
Mm-hmm.
My sister was a victim of sexual assault by her first fiance,
Mm-hmm.
and he tried to tell her that, oh, it's okay, we're because we're going to be married. So that was his justification
Mm-hmm.
for it being okay. And so because of that, I'm very wary of people trying to joke about that type of thing. Is there a way to do it and not be, I guess, canceled is the buzzword right
Yeah.
now? Is it possible? Yes. However, you have to think about, like, if you have to be that delicate and be on that big of a pedestal, like, is it worth trying to do that to get a laugh?
Yeah,
Like,
absolutely.
yeah, I mean, there are people braver than I that will go out and do that, and it resonates with everybody, and that's great. But I used to be a stand-up comedian. I was a stand-up for a while, and it's like, that is something that I could never do as a comic, is talk about something so traumatizing like that. It's just the very idea of doing that just makes my skin crawl.
I mean, yeah,
But
absolutely. Yeah,
yeah,
that's definitely things to consider, and I'm not even necessarily saying that. I'm
no,
when
no,
when I,
no.
when I mention these kinds of things to bring back into comic books, I'm talking just more like the over the top super villains that don't have to be speaking to our political and societal climate. They can just be almost Saturday morning cartoon villains, and the heroes
Oh
can
yeah,
be who they are. I obviously understand that, even that would probably ruffle some feathers, being like, oh, it's so unrealistic, or you're totally ignoring our reality just by putting out this
yeah.
mindless
I'm.
dribble.
I mean, people talk about it being not realistic. You're talking about a character that shoots web out of his wrist, or invents a contraption to shoot out web.
Mm-hmm.
Like, how realistic is that?
Mm-hmm.
Like, realism in comics is all well and good, but if you go into it expecting realism and you get somebody like the Juggernaut, you
Mm-hmm.
know, you're gonna be disappointed, because you know that ain't happening. If you want realism and the main character has adamantium claws coming out of his hand, that's not the comic for you.
Mm-hmm.
Now there are comic books or graphic novels that
Mm-hmm.
that definitely do appeal to a more realistic frame of mind, and they're just as valid and just as good as the more fantasy or sci-fi or anything else. But excuse me.
Mm-hmm.
But you have people that want to go into something like Deadpool and wanting realism. Yeah.
As Rob Liefeld, actually, when I met him at a Comic-Con, he basically described Deadpool as literally all the crap, like from the failed X gene experiments.
Yeah.
To put all the crap together and you get Deadpool.
Yeah. If you go into like Spider-Man, X-Men, Batman, Superman, expecting realism, Batman especially because how people do not know that Bruce Wayne is Batman just just by looking at all of his gadgets and his little toys.
Mm-hmm.
Like, because that shit ain't cheap.
Oh no. Yeah, I know.
Yeah, and people always think like oh, he must have a connection to Bruce Wayne. It's like, yeah, but not the one you think.
Mm-hmm.
How people don't put that together is beyond me. And I know a lot of it is like, comic book logic
Suspension
and
of
everything.
disbelief.
Yeah, that's why Superman can disguise himself by wearing fucking glasses.
Yeah. That's more egregious to me than Batman being able to hide his toys.
That one right there I never understood, because if his glasses fall off, be it accidentally or whatever, boom, all of a sudden, oh, you're Superman. Like, get the fuck out of here.
And not only that, but then how don't any of his villains know how to directly strike against him is Lois Lane?
Yeah.
Not like he hit his marriage ever.
Yeah.
But I digress.
Yeah, or like with Spider-Man and Mary Jane,
Yep.
or Aunt May.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
It's like who do those two people have in common? Peter fucking Parker. This is not rocket science, people. I mean, this is not difficult to grasp. But honestly, I think that once people can accept these new norms about these characters, I honestly think that that's when the more fun and playful side will come back. I think it's partly because people just need to get used to the fact that, yes, Spider-Man is now a black Mexican boy. Ironheart is a black woman. There is a female Thor.
Although that one doesn't make any sense, because if Thor is meant to be a mythological god, then how can that be the case? I mean, that's the one I got to call you on, because it's like in Norse mythology, Thor was always a man.
Yeah, I know nothing about the Thor universe. I was just throwing shit out there.
No, I get it, and it's trust me, it makes no sense to me either.
Yeah, if Jane Foster wants to try to wield Mjolnir, then so be it. I mean, it's more power to her. I mean, I don't care enough to even have a comment about it.
Yeah, the only thing I'll say is that was a case in the comics. That was definitely one of the cases of cringy writing, with her basically, with the villains basically being almost Saturday morning cartoon with their misogyny of mansplaining, and I was just like, I had to roll my eyes at this, like, the writer's trying to really get us to sympathize with the hero here, huh?
Yeah. Now, if you want a good example of like a superhero being the elements being fun and carefree and not taking themselves too seriously, Captain Planet.
Nice.
Captain Planet is the epitome of what I think were the best qualities of the superhero genre. It
Yeah,
had a
quite
positive.
literally
It had
Saturday
a
morning cartoon fodder.
yeah. It has a positive message, but it doesn't necessarily try to shove it down your throat. It's like, hey, you know, we live on this planet, and let's make it more livable. That's the entirety of the Captain Planet mythos right
Mm-hmm.
there, you know. And you have these very much so over the top villains that cause chaos for the sheer pleasure of causing chaos.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, you don't take them as seriously of a threat because, like, okay, one of them literally looks and oinks like a pig. You cannot take that seriously.
Mm-hmm.
Um um like, and now, of course, they had the occasional, like, heavy episodes involving, like, drug use and everything, but again, that was a product of the time. um like, I think, like, Dare was a big
Right.
to do at that time, so it
I
was
think
like,
the Nostalgia Critic even pointed out that they did an episode with AIDS or something like that.
yeah, something like that, yeah. But that was also something that, they didn't make a habit of it. It was just like, it was a very once in a while thing, and it was used as a tool to educate and not, be preachy about it.
So, in other words,
And
what you're saying is we need to go back to the 90s. All right, I'll get my DeLorean. Oh, wait.
I I think a lot of these things could do with a less problematic 90s mentality in
So, like,
terms
like
of,
the kind of more openness of the 90s, but without the 90s ness.
yeah, like, okay, good example, Mighty Morphin Power Rangers.
Right.
That was, like, when I was in my younger days, that was the thing to be watching.
Mm-hmm.
Because, again, it was a classic example. It had the classic formula of, like, over the top villains that were very comical in nature. Don't take them seriously, and
Mm-hmm.
over the top outlandish protagonists that were equally as goofy, and you don't take too seriously. And that was the appeal of it.
Mm-hmm.
And I get the idea of wanting more serious topics in your media, because a lot, if nothing else, then because the reader grows up with these characters. They want to see more. I think they want to see more of the struggles they go through and how these people deal with it. That I get, but the seriousness needs to be toned down, I think, immensely. Because especially in comics, I've seen everything is getting way too serious. Like, when stuff like sexual assault is becoming the norm in comic books, I think that's when, shit needs to be taken back a little bit, and
Mm-hmm.
it's like, because there's only so many places you can go after that.
Mm-hmm.
And none of those places are things that I want to be a part of, like, as a fandom, or just as a casual fan. The seriousness needs to, I think, seriously, the seriousness of these themes needs to be toned down, and they need to go back to a less stressful and a more carefree way of being.
Absolutely, and that's definitely one point we can agree upon.
Yeah.
Ironically, you bring up the whole, sexual assault thing that brings to mind of all people. Frank Miller said something actually poetic in regards to sexuality in comic books and saying, why would we want, them to be like normal like us? What's the point then?
Yeah.
When the whether it's the act itself or them underneath the costume, what's the point of them being the same as us? That's so boring. And I
Yeah.
mean, obviously, that's not to say that, like, oh, you make it exciting, that means that comic books somehow makes sexual assault exciting with the powers or what have you. No, 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 that's
Hmm.
not it at all. It's more the idea that, you know, to bring a real world issue and to make it seem in the world of superheroes is nice and all, but especially when, you have all of these various powers and things going on, why would you just stick to that if you have no rules or little rules?
Hmm. It's like when okay, when you have things like when Peter Parker was like a teenager,
Hmm.
you know, and like he had stories about dealing with acne and asking girls out.
Hmm.
That today is still relatable because
Absolutely.
kids are still going through that. And there needs to be, I think, like a call back to like when things were a bit simpler,
Hmm.
or not simpler, but when things were less complicated in terms of themes
Hmm.
that there are now. Because I promise you that if the storylines of these comics were less strenuous, I guarantee you, not many as many people would really give a shit about so and so being gay or Muslim or whatever. I think I think with the serious tone, there comes more of an expectation about how things should be. And when you change that, be it immediately or over time, if they don't see it coming, they automatically go on the attack.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, and in that regard for sure. I mean, for anybody who's, actually listened to this point, I think the biggest summation here is that we're both kind of coming at it from a very, very similar perspective, some conflicting ideals, but
Mhm.
a very, very similar kind of mindset. The idea that diversity and inclusion on the whole is good. It's going to happen probably in terms of, an industry step or a necessary step. Just kind of more debate about where the industry and entertainment, and I guess in general, you could almost say is, and like, is it pushing it in the correct way? Is it just a matter of the vocal minority getting in people's heads and, kind of in making it sound worse than it actually is, like the backlash, which, I mean, for some instances, it is a vocal minority, but then you have
Yeah,
stuff like the female led Ghostbusters, which most people, especially those that gave it a chance, said was unfunny, and it wouldn't have mattered if the cast was male or female. It was poorly written, kind of
yeah, and I
thing.
think I think that's the big takeaway because I have not seen the all female
Neither have I. I've just
Ghostbusters
read some
movie.
reviews.
Yeah, I don't think that. Like, I think the fact that it was an all female cast, I think added fuel to the incel fire. On top of it being just a bad movie, and I mean, well, what do you expect when it's an all woman cast? It's like, dude, shut the fuck up.
Well, they
Like,
were all
just
professional comedians that were given crap content,
yeah, a
especially
bad
Leslie
script.
Jones.
Yeah, a bad script is a bad script, regardless of who's in it.
Yeah, you could
I,
have
I
Shakespeare writing the damn script. If it's his worst play, it's his worst play.
yeah, like I adore Leslie Jones. Like I loved her on Saturday Night Live. You know, I think she's hilarious. Same with Melissa McCarthy.
Mm-hmm.
You know, these are funny women.
Mm-hmm.
Not
Funnier than
just
Amy
women.
Schumer.
Yeah, no, fuck Amy Schumer.
No
No,
arguments there.
not even funny women. These are funny people.
Yep.
These are funny actors. You shouldn't limit them to being just like oh, they're funny for a woman. Like fuck off.
No. I wouldn't say
Yeah,
that either if I
no,
was
but
talking about them in conversation. Yeah.
yeah, these are funny people.
Mm-hmm.
Regardless of what they like. Bill Burr said it best. It doesn't matter if you have a dick or a twat. If you're funny, you're funny.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what needs to be put across. Like the fact that it was a fact that it was a bad movie, that's not their fault.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because they're actors, they only have so much pull
mm-hmm.
on as far as like creative control. Other actors, you know, if they were more like the more prominent that they have more creative control. But you know, that's not always going to be a given. But the fact that I think like I said, I think a lot of people just jumped on the fuck this film fire because it had an all-female starring cast.
Mm-hmm.
I mean I think that was the main catalyst for that happening. And even before the movie came out, they were like oh, they're gonna be it's like four chicks starring in this movie. It's probably gonna suck. And like those people, I doubt they know what a vagina feels like. So I don't take their opinion very seriously or at all.
No, I don't either.
Yeah.
It's one of those things where I often have misgivings about it, but
Mm-hmm.
about these certain situations, but it's generally usually comes down to just how the marketing portrays it. Really, it's got nothing to do with the actual cast themselves. It's more,
Oh yeah.
it's more how it's framed. Like if it's framed like, hey, look at all these black people starring in a movie. Cheer this, please. You know.
Yeah, and it's like, and it's not even necessarily like all on the writer. Like,
Oh no, either the marketing
you know,
teams.
there's the director, there's producer interference. It's like there's a multitude. Like for all we know, the original script could have been amazing,
Mm-hmm.
but the producers wanted something, and they're like, well, if we don't get this, fuck you and your movie. You're not making it. So they have to compromise, because I've heard of that happening so many times.
Oh yeah, I'm sure.
About producer interference, and it's killed so many good movies, and it's just so disheartening.
Yeah. That the AVP movies would have been good if they'd stuck to the books. Oh, sorry, I'm just lamenting something that was so beautiful.
I liked the first Alien versus Predator movie.
It wasn't terrible. Requiem.
Yeah.
Ugh.
Requiem for a Dream, I literally could not. I watched the first 30 minutes and I was just like, I can't do this.
Trust me, you got out at the right time, because I think around the 45-minute mark is where the only reason why I continued to watch it was because I had literally nothing better to do. It was I paid money to actually rent it. It was oh god, I wish I was making this up, but there was a scene with a xenomorph in a hospital who somehow, I don't know how this is even a thing, but sticks one of the mouth tendrils down this pregnant woman's gullet, and that somehow creates more xenomorphs from a very pregnant woman. Yeah, I know, it doesn't make sense either.
Yeah, I mean, okay, that was
a thing that happened in an AVP movie in the actual theatrical cut.
Jesus. Like, okay, I will give you a prime example. Like, okay, well, like we were talking about before, Batman versus Superman.
Mm-hmm.
I fucking loved Batman versus Superman. Like, I've got the extended cut of the movie. Is it a perfect movie? No. There's so many flaws about that film, but that didn't stop me from enjoying it for what it was.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, I liked both Suicide Squad
Same.
movies.
Very much so.
Yeah.
I loved him more than most people. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Jared Leto was atrocious as the Joker.
Yeah.
You know, should never have been cast. That was a horrible casting decision. But
The only thing worse
he,
was Jesse Eisenberg and his mullet. Like, seriously, you had to have him look like Mark Zuckerberg if he was going to play Lex Luthor.
Pretty much, yeah. But again, like Jared Leto is in it so little that it did not make me not enjoy it. Now the Zack Snyder Justice League.
I haven't watched it yet.
It is far superior above the theatrical cut, and Jared Leto is in that. At the very end, he's reprised the Joker.
I remember hearing that. Yeah,
but he did a much more. I think he did a much better job because he was more subdued. He was more subtle. He wasn't trying to be outlandish and outrageous.
He didn't have the Post Malone rapper tattoo things going on completely.
Yeah. And in that instance, that version of the Joker worked.
Mm-hmm.
That one was a good interpretation. I almost did not know it was the same actor. I thought it was a completely different person. And that's the thing. It's like I could go watch the all-female Ghostbusters movie and enjoy it. That doesn't mean that it doesn't make the opinion of somebody that didn't like it. It doesn't make their opinion any less valid. It's like, okay, like if they have a legitimate reason for not liking it, like if they just cannot watch it because, script or acting or, continuity, whatever, that's one thing. But to sit there and say like, oh, it's two chicks, I don't want to watch it. Fuck you. It's just.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one thing I will say definitively when it comes to like all of these, instances that I've talked about when it comes to the books or movies or whatever for both, comics and what have you. It's not that I'm not necessarily going to watch something because it's got a woman or a diversity lead. It's just going to make me a little less interested to watch it right out of the gate or read it right out of the gate and maybe take my interest out of it entirely, but not because I don't think that it could work. It's just more or less it's like, okay, I am maybe a little set in my ways. I will be the first to admit it, but at the same time, I also think that if I don't, I know you said boycotts don't count, but I think that if, hey, if I don't do it and I talk to some of my friends, they don't do it, I mean, hey, at least if we're doing it for the right reasons, like, we just don't think that this is, going to work in the long term or it's ill-conceived and it's done for only, the reason of they're, much like Hollywood creatively going bankrupt and they're just like, if we change the race, ethnicity, or gender of somebody, that'll prolong our careers, right?
It'll give it a momentary
breath of fresh air, yeah.
Yeah, Jay Delarose. Hello.
Yeah, hey man. Greetings.
Taking a property that it's a boys and men thing and feminizing it so that boys and men are inherently not interested in it is just cringe. Not a single property has been built for girls, and that's
yes, absolutely. I agree with that. Very good one, sir. Very good, sir.
There's rarely, if ever, been a property that has been put out exclusively for women, because again, it goes back to the point that comic books are predominantly a male audience, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, but because if I guarantee you that if there were more openly if there were more women that openly read comic books without shame, I promise you there would be more female centered characters,
Mm-hmm.
like written by women for women. I honestly think that there would be more female. I don't want to say female because it just sounds patronizing. But I think there would be more women um,
Leads.
in that line of work. Hang
Oh,
on one
absolutely. I can
second.
tell you on one hand, like the really the only female writers that kind of leap to mind are
Hello.
Gail Simone, maybe. So, yeah.
Oh, sorry. I'm on the phone right now.
No biggie. I'll chat
My
and
nephew called.
entertain.
Uh,
Uh,
what's up, buddy?
so yeah, I mean, it's definitely a big. It's definitely got you know, the
Don't worry about
opportunity
it.
for
It's all
growth. I think also, you know, taking things that are predominantly men, and if you made, you know, for men and presenting them in kind of a much more engaging way
yeah,
is also
yeah.
something that can be
I
done
totally get it.
going forward with,
That's no problem, bud.
for example,
Oh,
you've got you know,
yeah.
like, what about a
Whenever
female
you want to come
action
by, if you
ensemble squad
whenever,
that isn't, you know, like based
it'll be
on a
here.
property that we all know?
All right,
That
bud.
would definitely be
Bye.
something I'd buy into. Like, if it's not like, instead of
Okay.
making Ocean's 11 the female version, make something where, you know, even if it's unrealistic, get a bunch of, you know, badass machismo, you know, MMA chicks, if they can act decently
Hmm.
enough, you know, and like say a
Yeah.
Ronda Rousey or something like that, have them star in a big badass 80s style action movie. And you know what? I'd watch that. I mean, if it's written, you know, well enough and competently enough, I'd actually legitimately watch that. And, you know, you can bring
Yeah.
that same mentality to comic books too, very
See,
easily.
and that's the thing. People want. I mean, there. I know. Again, not most, but some people want to be a part of something, or people will support something just because, like, it's all female or it's all black or
Mm-hmm.
whatever. Like, I get the want to be supportive of that, but if the end product is, for lack of a better word, shit,
Mm-hmm.
then, you know, it it I don't it doesn't help push along that narrative.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that's why it's like I will not support something just because, like, okay, like, if I find out that there is like an all female version of something, my first inclination is not to be like ooh, women, ew, but if it's got actors that I'm aware of, then I'm more inclined to go see that, because like okay, I'm aware of the caliber of talent that I can expect from these women, because these are very capable and good actors. And if it turns out that it is not what I thought it was going to be, my first instinct is not to blame the actors doing it, and that's a big problem with a lot of, well, again, with some of these people, that they have it in their heads that that the actors the in these productions are somehow responsible for the finished product, and that could not be further from the truth at all. But they think that, oh, they're attached to this project, ergo they must have signed off on it. They must think, and they may go into it thinking that it's a good product at first. You know, they can, and that's totally justifiable. You know, they could go into it thinking that it's a good project and not know about the aftermath until after it's been released. I can't tell you how many stories I've read about actors that go into the projects like they only worried about their part or their character, which again, perfectly fine. And then they see the finished result and it's absolute horseshit. And they're ashamed that they were a part of that. So to blame and to blame the actor themselves for a project not panning out the way you envisioned it is not the healthiest way of, because like we've said, there's a plethora of reasons why a project fails or why a show gets canceled after one season, or why this video game bombs, or why this comic book stops after 5 issues. If the people are not satisfied with the outgoing product, then they're not going to, like, people talk with their wallets. And it's I mean that's why shit like Grand Theft Auto Online
is still around 10 years later, quite literally.
And why Red Dead Redemption Online is quite literally a ghost town, because Rockstar is putting all of their proverbial eggs into the basket of GTA Online, and they sat on their asses for years before even thinking about putting out Grand Theft Auto 6. Because, you know...
Well, we don't even need to go down that rabbit hole of what they really did.
Yeah. But, again, there's plenty of reasons to be upset that a certain project doesn't pan out. Blaming the actors associated with it is usually like the bottom of your, should be at the bottom of your list of priorities. You know, there's like I said, there's the director, there's studio interference. Like, they have a producer that's like, I want a penguin in here. Why? Just do it. Like, okay. And they do it. And, you know, and shit goes south. Like, but to blame the person you see on the screen saying the words, I think is like, it's a very ignorant way to go about it.
Absolutely. Forgive this digression, but for all my fellow cheeseheads and Packer fans out there, Packers tied 3-3 with the New Orleans Saints in preseason action at Lambeau. Go Pack, go! That's one of those things that you can't almost help with when it comes to, you know, Wisconsin. You talk about, I'm sure there's plenty of things in South Carolina that are or Carolina, North Carolina, or just anywhere.
South Carolina, yeah.
So
I ain't worried about being doxxed. No, nobody gives a shit about where I live.
well, true, but I'm sure maybe though instead of cheeseheads and Packers and beer for you, it's like I don't know, hush puppies and Cajun
Oh,
shrimp.
around here it's all about Clemson and Gamecocks, and I
The
could not
worst
give
name for a team ever.
less of a fuck about sports at
Fair enough.
all.
Not for everybody,
Yeah,
but
and because around here, especially if it's Clemson versus USC, it's like all of a
shut the
sudden
state down. Yeah.
everybody and their mother has some sort of special going on as far as like involving food. It's like, hey, buy five get buy five wings, get 35 more for $1 or some such shit like that. And it's just like, okay.
I'll take it. I don't care
Yeah,
about the game, but
yeah,
thanks for the
yeah.
food, suckers.
Exactly. But I think for me, if I continue down this path, I'm gonna end up just
Rambling.
repeating, repeating points I've already said.
No, I appreciate the input, and it was great
Oh
to
yeah,
have somebody to go back and forth with. I think that
absolutely.
this is actually this was very productive. I think that I'm not afraid of what's YouTube's gonna say about this when I post this VOD to my channel, because
Yeah,
honestly, like same mentality that you have in regards to I know I'm a nobody, but even then, I mean, I haven't said anything really goddamn inflammatory. If I
nah,
have,
you're
then
fine.
honestly, if what I said was inflammatory, it's only because God forbid somebody ever asked the question, kind of
Yeah,
thing.
and there's absolutely nothing wrong with asking questions, especially if it's a subject that you are ignorant about or want to educate yourself on. Because if you don't ask questions, then you're not gonna learn. It's just all there is to it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's one of the big problems with our society, especially speaking from the autistic perspective. I often feel like I have to
Mhm.
bite my tongue until I choke on blood, because are people even going to listen to me if I ask a question, or if I even, God forbid, come across like I'm seemingly playing devil's advocate when in reality I'm just trying to get a straight answer here.
Yeah, and
So,
again, I have nothing but sympathy for you on that end because I have absolutely no idea what that must be like. But you
social media
know,
is a hellscape, even more so than usual. I'll just end with that.
yeah. All right. Well, with that said, I'm gonna head on out.
All right.
But
Peace out
this was
then. Have a good night. And I might play some Fall Guys tomorrow if you're interested. You don't have to jump on
cool.
chat, but I will be playing
Yeah.
maybe on stream. So,
All right, cool, man. All right.
all right.
I'll
Peace
see you
out.
then. Bye.
Yep. All right. Well, that was my good friend Toy Toy TL3. He's got a Twitch channel. You can check him out on Twitch if you want. He streams games too. And speaking of game streaming, I'm probably going to plan on doing so tomorrow. Like I said, maybe playing some Fall Guys. Uh, so if that's your jam, I'd appreciate you guys coming out. I hope you guys enjoyed this. It was nice, good banter back and forth. I appreciate the chat from Jay Delaraz. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. That's much appreciated to the engagement. Um, but anyways, to quote the awesome song from the brand new album Shine Down Planet Zero, and in fact, I think I'm going to be doing this. Maybe this might be my new catchphrase for closing these. Is good, and that being goodbye, so long, see you later, goodbye. Did you enjoy the ride? Well, I hope you did, and you got what you wanted. Until next time, everybody. Ta ta for now, and peace to you all.